Howdy folks, EJ here, and today I'm in a fabulous little rainbow village created by the Adrian Brightmore Fabulify filter, or whatever it's called. Anyway, today I've got another cool redstone contraption to show you all. Basically, I'm going to be explaining and teaching you how to use a concept that I used in the recent module that I released just a couple of days ago with the whole Edgecraft UHC kind of thing. Now, basically what this module does, once you've got it all set up, is it allows you to detect whether or not there is a block above a player's head and start giving them a score based on that. For example, here I've got a score that is counting up my insanity, making me more and more insane the longer I stay underneath this thing, which could be inside a house, it could be underground, who knows. And you can use that score to do something. For example, the way I had it set up in the Edgecraft UHC module is if you stayed underground for too long, you would start to get poison and insanity and all sorts of crazy stuff. And then when you come out, you can see that my score gets set back to 0. But you can also use this same method to detect how many blocks are above a player's head. So if I go ahead and add the second scoreboard to the sidebar, now you can see that as I'm standing under this one, I get a score of 1. If I stand under this one, I get a score of 2. When I stand under here, I get a score of 3, a score of 4, and if I wanted to do something really crazy, I could come over here and say, how many blocks are above my head in this random spot? 5 apparently. 2, 0, 4. Basically, it measures however many blocks are above my head. So 1, 2 blocks above my head. This should be only 1 block above my head. If I go under the middle of it, it should be like 8. Wow! Alright, so yeah, this basically just shows you how many blocks are above your head. And you can use that to do all sorts of crazy things. Anyway, let's go ahead and show you how this works. This module has 3 parts. The first part actually tells us how many blocks are above the player's head at any given time. That's the backbone of the module that I want to cover. The second part of the module is just an example of what you can do with this number. For example, here, this is counting up an insanity score, like you saw earlier. Counting up my insanity score depending on how many blocks I had above my head, and then we can do something with negative effects based on how high of a score they get. That's how this module worked. But the main part of the module that I want to show you is this, because this is really cool right here. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at the first command blocks, and we can put them on this clock as we go to see what their effect is. And by the way, this clock is actually being run by this little thing in here. It's a little bit hopper clock because it doesn't really need to be run that fast. Unless you want it to be, I suppose it can. I was just trying to cut down on lag. And by the way, the command blocks will run in this order, going that way, because this is the positive X direction, this is the negative X direction, and command blocks always start from the most negative coordinate and go towards the most positive coordinate, if they're all run at the same time. So let's go ahead and get into the commands. These are the setup commands that you'll need to make this work. Scoreboard objectives add insanity dummy, so you can go ahead and add the insanity score. Then you can go ahead and press this extra one, which is scoreboard objectives add insanity dummy. That's just the 2 objective names that I chose for this module. And then these 2 just set the sidebar to whichever one we want. So for example, if we wanted insanity in the sidebar, we could do that. But I think I'm going to leave it on add insanity for now, because that's the one we're mainly going to be working with. So the first command that's going to be run is scoreboard players remove at all insanity 0. What this does is it takes away 0 from every player's add insanity score, which doesn't really change the value of their score, but it makes it so that if they don't already have a score, for example, on the sidebar you can see that it's not displaying anything. I have already clicked this button over here, which sets the sidebar to add insanity. That means that it's going to display the add insanity score over here. But since I don't have a score yet, I've never set myself to a score. It just thinks that there's nothing to display, so it's not even showing up, which is the problem for the rest of this module. So we kind of need to fix that issue, which is the only reason I put this here. So this actually tricks the game into thinking, oh, we need to update their score, even though it's not changing their score at all. So if we put this on the clock, you can see that the next time it updates, now that I have a score here. It's the same score as it was before, technically nothing, but now it actually has a number that we can work with instead of just no data entry at all. So this allows us to actually access it and deal with the score. And that's all that command does. This is basically just another setup one, and any new player that joins the world will automatically have their score basically set up so that it can work with the rest of this module. Next command that we're going to do is /stats entity at all set affected blocks at p add insanity, or whatever objective name that you decided to call it. The /stats command is really awesome, by the way. It allows you to track all sorts of statistics about entities, command blocks, whatever you want, and it saves you a lot of time. It's very cool, and you should learn how to use it if you haven't already. Anyway, what this command in particular is doing is it's doing /stats entity, meaning it's doing it on an entity, not a block, and it's doing it to all players. So all players will have this stat applied to them, and it's setting their affected block stat and it's storing that value. Basically, it's saying however many blocks the player affects by using a command. It will store that value in the nearest player. So for every one of these players, the nearest player will be themselves. So it's going to store in every player their own score for how many blocks they're affecting, and it's going to store that value in added sanity. Basically, that's a very complicated way to say that this command that we're putting on the clock right now says whenever the player runs a command that affects a number of blocks, it will put that score automatically in the sidebar here without needing to run any extra commands. That is very awesome, because now if I go ahead and do something like this with a fill command on this random place in the ground, it says 64 blocks filled. I just happened to fill an area with 64 blocks, and look over here, the score on the sidebar is now 64 blocks. What if I were to change this just ever so slightly to 96 and wool 11? Now it's filled a slightly bigger area, 88 blocks, and look at my score, it's updated to 88 blocks. So that's very powerful. We can tell how many blocks they're affecting no matter what they're doing, which is very cool. I will say that it might not be the best idea to have this command on a clock though, because I mean it's always applying the stat over and over again. I've noticed that it succeeds in doing it multiple times, so I don't know if that causes lag, but the reason I say that is because in my actual module I updated it so that it wouldn't automatically add new players the way it does here. But I figured that it would be easier just to automatically add new players and set them up with a stat in this particular instance. But that's just something to watch out for if you ever need to worry about it. Anyway, now that we've got a score, we can do something with this score. So this command over here says execute at all clone . So now we're getting into the awesomeness. This is how we detect how many blocks are above our head. If we look in this command block, you can see that it's executing at all players. So every player is now going to run the following command. /clone, the same place as them, 2 blocks above their head, same place as them. So basically the block right above your head, 2 blocks above your feet, that is the block that it's going to be selecting now. And it's going to clone from the block right above your head to same block as them, 255, Y level 255, all the way at sky limit. Same place as them. So that's 2 sets of coordinate. It's going to clone from here, right here, all the way up to sky limit 255, and then it's going to clone that whole area to the exact same place that I just took it from. As you can see, this whole place right here and these 3 coordinates right here are the same place. So it's going to clone this whole area to the same place. Basically, it's not going to affect any of the blocks at all. So it's not actually going to change what the blocks are. It's not going to move them. It's not going to do anything to them. But what it is going to do is it's going to try to move the blocks, thinking that they're moving, but really they're staying in the same place. And then I'm just doing masked, which says only do it to blocks that are not air, just to leave the air alone and we don't count the air. And force, which basically says, yes, go ahead and do it. I know it's the same place, and I know you're not supposed to do that, but yes, I want to clone the blocks onto the same place. And that's all you need to make this command work. Even though it's cloning the blocks to the same place and nothing is changing, it's still processing those blocks. It's still saying, hey, you're cloning all these blocks. Let me count how many of these blocks there are. And since we have the stat set up, it automatically checks, how many blocks have you got? Oh, this many blocks. And that way you can tell how many blocks are above a player's head. So let's go ahead and add this to the clock, and now you should see it updates. So now it's constantly updating. Every time this command is run, it is checking to see how many blocks are above my head. It's cloning all the blocks from right above my head to 255 and counting how many blocks there are. So right here, there's 1 block. But if I go ahead and add 2 more blocks, now it should be 3. And if I go back over here, you see it should be 4 or 3 or however many this is going to be. I don't even know. 2 blocks apparently. And it's completely accurate. It counts them automatically. You don't need to worry about it. You don't need to get any new scoreboard values. It just tells you how many blocks are above the player's head at any given moment. You can even run this on a fill clock if you want to get it updating 20 times a second instead of once every time the hopper clock goes off. But this is a very effective way to figure out how many blocks are above a player. And you can use this for any other area as well, using the same technique. You don't have to do it right above a player. You can check how many blocks are below the player. You can check how many blocks are nearby the player. You can check how many diamond blocks are near the player, which is all very cool. And that is basically the module that I wanted to show you. These 3 command blocks and these couple setup command blocks are all the commands you need to make this amazing little contraption that checks how many blocks are around you, and you can update this for all your own purposes and do amazing things with this. Now I'm just going to give you an example of what you could possibly do with this and show you the insanity module that I hooked up earlier. So let me go ahead and set my insanity score to the sidebar. And now we'll be able to keep track of the insanity score as it's happening. Now what these other command blocks do is they say, alright, you've got an add insanity score, you've got a certain number of blocks above your head, how many blocks do you have, and we'll add you a score based on that. Now I just did a very simple example. So what this command does is it says scoreboard players add anyone who has a score of add insanity of at least 1, meaning that there's at least 1 block above their head. It will add them insanity 1, so that any player who has at least 1 block of their head is going to get at least 1 insanity score added to them. And that's just a really easy way to basically count whenever they have a block above their head, just add 1 to their score. So if I go over here, you should see when I have a block above my head, I'm getting a score added to me every second. If I don't have a block above my head, I don't get any score added to me. That's what that block is doing. This other one over here is basically the exact same thing. Scoreboard players add at all, scoreboard add insanity min, but this time it says 30. This means if they have at least 30 blocks above their head, if they're kind of deep underground mining or something, add an insanity 1 again. So this is going to be true because they have at least 1. Then it's also going to run the second command, which says if they have at least 30 blocks above their head, add another insanity point. So basically, if they're underground really deep, it's going to add twice as fast as if they're just standing underneath a tree or something. And that's just the way we wanted to do this module. We could actually do some scoreboard operations on the insanity and say like, divide the number of blocks above their head by 5 and then add that to your score, but that's a little bit too complicated, so I just wanted to give a quick, easy example. And the third command block here basically just resets their score if they're not underground anymore. So if they come out from underneath the ground, it'll set their score back to 0. Scoreboard players set every player who has a maximum score of 0, meaning that they have at the very most 0 blocks above their head, insanity 0. So it sets them back to 0 if they have no blocks above their head. That's the easiest way to understand it. And then that's all the green carpeted section, and that's pretty much all the technical stuff. We have a way to figure out how many blocks above their head, we have a way to figure out how much insanity they should get based on that. Now we just need to add some punishments for if they get too high of an insanity score. So the first one we have is affect everyone with an insanity score of at least 500, a hunger with a power of 30 for 1 second. So that's quite a lot of hunger, but only for 1 second, so it's not too bad. But at the same time, it's still kind of a crazy amount of hunger, and it's not good to get caught underground for 500 seconds, and you want to make sure that you keep resetting your insanity score by going outside. To make sure that you don't end up with that horrible, horrible punishment. And if that wasn't enough, it also gives them nausea. This is basically the exact same command block, only it gives them nausea, and also it says M equals 0, only people in survival mode. I forgot to add that to the other command block, but it's no big deal. This one will only affect people in survival mode. If I change it to 1, it would only do people in creative mode, but yeah, I don't really want to deal with nausea. And then these final 2 command blocks basically say if you still haven't done anything about it, if you got to 500 and you got the nausea and you still didn't go up to the surface, you're going to get some real punishment here. So affect anybody who has a score of at least 650 insanity, poison them, which is crazy. And then if they actually got all the way up to 650, there's nothing else that we're going to do to them that's bad. So we just go ahead and set their score from 650 back down to 500, and they can start counting up again. Basically, this means every time they get to 650, it'll set them back to 500, and they can count up to 650 again. So that just means you can stay underground for as long as you want, but you'll get poisoned every 150 seconds until you go back up to the surface and fix that situation. And that's all this module does. It's pretty simple, pretty easy to figure out, but it's also very powerful, very cool, and can be used in a lot of different ways. But that is about it for this tutorial and this module. Hopefully this was helpful to you. Any relevant commands will be in the description, so you can check them out for yourself. Hopefully you'll be able to figure this out and use it to create some really awesome ways to detect diamonds around you and all sorts of cool stuff like that. This is a very cool concept. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. I actually had the original idea for this because of Dragnaws. He posted a video a year ago showing you how you can detect whether a player is underground or in a cave. and he used a method with test for blocks where you basically test if the blocks above you are the same as a certain coordinate. So for example, like at 0, 0, he would have an entire strip all the way up to sky of just air, and he would test to see if the blocks above your head are the same as the air in that one specific spot. The problem with that is it's not mobile. You can't install it like anywhere in the world. It has to be at a specific coordinate. And another problem with it is it's just a little bit annoying to have to like test for blocks, use a comparator or something like that. So this is a lot easier of a method to do. Anyway, I'm rambling a little bit, but if you want to download this creation for yourself and check it out, all the commands will be either in the description, or you can just download the one command creation that I released not too long ago, the Edgecraft UHC module. And it does have a bunch of other stuff as well, but the main commands you need will be right here with the hopper clock. The hopper clock's like right here or something. And then these are all the insanity commands that you need. All the other commands just do other things, add scoreboard objectives and whatnot. But that's about it. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you guys all later. Bye bye!